the treasury of all wisdom. Christ is the true pattern for all of life. Christ is the tough ground for the believer's faith. We're not built up in wise living by hacking at the leaves of the problems in our diverse relationships at work, in marriage, parenting, and even in the church, but by taking deep roots in Christ. In the next few months, we will learn how to dig at the roots of our diverse relational problems and how to develop strong relationships with others by being firmly established in our relationship with Christ in our new sermon series titled Rooted and Built Up in Christ.
Welcome not just to Sunday, but welcome to our hymn Sunday. I've never heard Femi Akinwari sing before. Today he was the loudest person, right? He was just belting out the hymns. You see, he just seems so happy. Look at him, right? All those contemporary songs that we sing that we're just playing around, fooling around. We don't know what we're doing. All right. And somebody, I think Femi said too, that since we're having a singles meeting this week, that should the married people have their own GC? You know, I don't know what we'll be talking about. All right, well, welcome. If you're joining us for the first time or you've not been here in a while, we are doing a series through the book of Colossians, and we're in Colossians chapter 3 right now. We've got, in Colossians 1 to 2, we saw that the relationship between us and God through Jesus Christ. So there was a lot of focus on Jesus Christ. If you like, it was the theology, the theory that then leads to chapters 3 and 4, where you see a lot of practicals, and it is more about relationships with one another. And so we looked, in the last 2 Sundays, we looked at marriage, relationships in marriage, and now we want to take another turn. I don't know if you've ever been called upon to speak on something that you are sure exceeds your capacity. There was a senior friend of mine who is a banker, and he told me that sometimes he would be called to headquarters to give a presentation on something he had no idea about. And so he often used words like sustainability, stable platform, increasing capacity, robust balance sheet, negotiating from a place of strength. I'm like, wow. I said, did it work? He said, yeah, of course it worked all the time. And I often wondered, why is it that the people that were listening to him, how come they didn't figure out that this thing was hollow? Well, the answer is because that's how they even got their own promotion as well. So, but honestly, this is one topic that I feel is too big for me. I have dreaded preaching about this for a while now because, you know, as a parent, I'm only a 7-year-old parent. I've only been parenting for 7 years before you think something else, all right? And the truth is, if you ask some of the people, the teachers in City Kids, they would say, who is preaching on parenting? Femi, Osunnuyi. Have you met Femi and Timileyin before? What's he doing here? You know, parenting isn't easy. And one thing I often say about parenting is the one sure thing about your parenting is that you are unsure about everything you are doing. You know, you try this and you're like, I don't even know, it sounds right, but I'm not sure whether it's really working. Then you try another one. You know, we're just trying to figure it out. But thankfully, you don't have to listen to my opinions. We have the Word of God to help us to work through the complexity of what parenting is. Now, I also want to say that this passage that we're looking at is not just focusing on parenting, it's focusing on what it means to be under a parent as well. So it works both ways. And as I said, it's complex. If you look at the two passages in verse 20 and verse 21 in Colossians chapter 3, you find something very similar to what we saw last time. Why is it just two passages when you think about something this complex? Is it because the Bible doesn't have a lot to say about it? No, it does. But at the same time, by understanding that this is a very complex relationship, it doesn't want to give too many instructions. It will paint a broader picture. And then those two instructions that you see are going to fit into that broader picture of what parenting is all about. And so whether you are an empty nester, that is, your children have left, whether you are parenting teenage children, whether you are parenting very young toddlers, or you are just starting out, or you are married and you don't yet have children, or as I said, if you are not even married, but you're still being someone's child, I think the Bible has a lot to say to us here today. It's a huge responsibility given to any human being to be responsible for others from their infancy. And it's an opportunity, it's a responsibility we must not waste. That's why we've called the title of this sermon, Don't Waste Your Parenting. So we'll start today. Today is going to be more, again, we'll set some background, more theological, or focus on a lot of principle, and then we'll be more practical next week. So we're going to look at this in three different subsections. The first, the design of parenting. The second, the task of parenting. And then the third, the goal of parenting. The design of parenting, the task of parenting, and then the goal of parenting. So I was saying, if you really want to understand Colossians 3, verse 20 and 21, that is, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. To understand parenting's design, you actually have to understand marriage's design. Now, again, I want to put these two instructions in the context of the larger and broader picture or context that the Bible sets for parenting. If you don't understand that, it's going to be very difficult to understand what it is that we're doing with parenting. And so that's why we have to go to the very beginning of the Bible. Now, what Chidima read for us, we first read Genesis. She read Genesis 1:27 to 28. And when God created mankind in his image and he told them to be fruitful and multiply. But then she moved to chapter 2, verses 18 to 24. I'm going to rush a little bit through that. So go there. What we find in God's original design for marriage, all right, notice in verse 18, God said it's not good. He showed that it's not good for the man that he had created to be alone. All right, good. But then what happens in verses 19 to 20 is he also demonstrates that all the other creatures that he has created are unsuitable helpers for this man. So the man should not be alone, but he shouldn't just be paired with any creature. He should be paired with a creature that is like him. And so God put the man, in verse 21 to 22, he put the man into a deep sleep. He took out one of his ribs, signifying that what he was going to create came out of him. And so he created a woman from that. Now notice, it was as though by the rib being in her, that she was in him. So when he takes her out of him, to show that they were truly united together, even though he now has two beings, what does he do? He brings them together. All right, do we get the picture? Now I want to point out two principles that you will see, particularly for us, in verse 24. If you want to understand what marriage is about, you look at verse 24. If you want to understand what parenting is all about, you look at verse 24. Let's look at verse 24 together. So let me just start with 23, but we're going to 24. The man said, this is now the bone of my bones and now the flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. Now, here's where we're going. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. What is the design of marriage? It's for two people, male and female, to be united together. For spouses to be united together. That is the design for marriage. And is to be united to his wife, and the two become one flesh. How many become one flesh? 3? 4? So what's the design for parenting? Well, look at the beginning. That is why a man leaves his father and mother. The design for parenting is a person leaves their parents. What's the design for parenting? A person leaves their parents. He leaves his father and his mother and then is united to someone else. In other words, the unity that you see in verse 24, there's only one place that unity is spoken about. There's a uniting, but there's a leaving. The unity is only meant to be between two people. That's why in the vows that many of us took, they say, we'll be together forever until what? Until love, until death do us part. Once the us is more than two, you're going to have a problem. The us was always meant to be two. If the us is we and our children, you've totally misunderstood what parenting is all about. Notice that even these people who got married, they left their own parents. It says, so shall a man leave who? His father, and leave them alone. They were meant to be together. You are not meant to be part of them. Leave the father and the mother. They've done their job. Now it's time for you to get out so that two of them can be united as it was in the beginning, so that you can go and be united to someone else, possibly. In other words, spouses are designed to be united with spouses until death, but children are designed to leave their parents after a reasonable amount of time. Now, of course, we understand this. Just think about what happens when you get you get a child. You get pregnant. There's conception. And after the conception, you know, the child is growing in the mother's womb. Growing. Until something called labor. Somebody say labor. What's labor? Let me tell you what labor is. Labor is basically the crisis that ensues when a baby's time in the womb is up. Do you understand? That is, there is a lot of struggle. Why? Your time is up. That is, yes, so you are meant to be in this womb, but you are not permanently meant to be in the womb. If you meet a woman who is 10 months pregnant, what do? You take her for deliverance, isn't it? That's what you do. You start saying, You go and do CS. CS is what? Isn't that deliverance? You are delivering that now. Medical deliverance. Okay, if you met a woman who was 14 months pregnant, that is not medical deliverance again. You are not sure what is inside there. Labor is saying that the time is up. And now, when the time is up, there is a struggle. But eventually the child comes. Labor is telling you that the womb is not the permanent resident of the child. All right, well, then what happens from labor? After labor, where do they move to? They move into your room. Whether it's a cot or whether it's a bed, they shall move into your room. And you know why they're in the room? Because they're still somewhat attached to the mother. They get hungry at night. But even that one has a expiry date, especially because of the men. Because if a child, especially the boys, you know, the girls, thank God for the girls. I never had a girl, but I know what would have happened. If I had a girl, she would know that it's time to leave after 6 months. But I had two boys. The first one stayed for 17 months. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave my wife alone. I told her, desperate times call for desperate actions. I carried him. We moved into a room together for 2 weeks. He forgot about her. I went back. I was united to my wife. So even from the womb, you know that their time is up. After a while from your room, they move into their own room. Do you see what's happening? They're moving away from you. And after they move into their room, you know, normally you go there, you put them to bed, you say good night, blah, blah. Before you know it, after a couple of years, they put, please knock before you enter this room. It's called zoning, parent zoning. They're like, all of a sudden you are talking to your child and it's like, how are you today? Fine. What did you do? Nothing. You know, they just don't want, why are you troubling me? They start moving. All of a sudden, they're experiencing, Mom, Dad, you can't understand me. You don't even getting ready. Then the next thing is, this one now is a test. It's a bit of a transition, depending on the kind of parent you are. Then they have to go to school, maybe secondary school. They've not actually left, but they are living somewhere else. Boarding school. Until they go to university, where they really just come in to come and collect money and collect food. I have done it before. Until one day, they no longer have to collect money from you. They are working, and then the next thing they say is, I need to move out. Because why do arguments come up between parents and children? You know why arguments come up between parents and children, especially when they're in their 20s? You know why? Arguments are basically what ensues when your time is up in your parents' home. The problem is when either the parents don't want to let the children go or the children themselves don't want to let their parents go. That is the problem. And we have that problem in this country, big time. There is sometimes we forget that it is, God has given me these children to take care of. But as you do that, as you invest in the children, as you love the children, what happens? It becomes more difficult to let go. And sometimes the children then, I was talking to somebody, there is no greater subsidy than living in your parents' house. You know that. Forget all you girls, some of you that are going out with some of these guys, ask them where they live. If they live in their parents' home, I can bet you, the moment the guy says, I want to move, I'll break up with him. Because all those presents that you are getting, they're not coming again. Because the guy is being subsidized 500 to 600K or 1.2 million, I don't know, depending on where you live. I shall not say my own. All right, let me not say it. But I also want to please quickly challenge something that may be controversial. I don't think the Bible teaches this. The only time it's time for you to move out, especially for the ladies, because we hold this principle, is from my father's house to what? That cannot be right if this passage is saying something. That's an overstretching of the passage. From my father's house to my husband's house. Now, if you want to do that for the sake of subsidy, that's one thing. But I know 30-year-old ladies whose parents or whose fathers still tell them who to date or who they cannot date. What to wear or what they cannot wear. When to come back home. Some of them, you have to come back home, 30-year-old, I'm not joking. Apart from work, you have to come back home at 7:30. Why, if you are that kind of lady, why do you feel very angry? Why is there constant problem between you and your parents? You know why? Your time is up. Your time is up. The idea has always been two to be united and become one flesh. When 3 or 4 or 5 try to be united, there is something fundamentally wrong with our parenting. Therefore, the job of parenting is an acquisition of skill, the skill of trying to let go. And that is very difficult. Some people, some children, they show you this. This tension starts very early. If you're a father and you have a daughter, 3-month-old daughter, what do you love doing more than anything? What do you love to carry her? Carry her, just pet her, When she looks and smiles, you give her a kiss. 5 months, you're still doing that. After a while, when she's now a year and you are trying to carry her, what does she want to do? She wants to calm down. But you don't want to let go. In many ways, as I said, the job of parenting is all about developing the skill to let go. You see, notice when I said that it's not from your father's home to your mother's home. Notice in that passage, it says, a man shall leave his father and mother. That's one step. The first step does not guarantee that it is because, the first step doesn't guarantee the second step is going to happen. Do you understand what I mean? The first step is you shall leave your father and mother. That is parenting's design. There is then a possibility that after you've left them, you may be joined to your wife or your husband. But that is not a guarantee. I keep saying this. I meet many people. You counsel them. You find out why is it that they can't take certain decisions on their own. They've not been able to leave their parents. Or their parents have not been able to leave them. But the Bible is saying that the design of parenting is eventually for the children to be let go. Now, in light of this, what's the role of a parent? Because even though it's saying you should let go, it's not just saying just let go. There is a process of letting go. If you are eventually to let them go, but they have to be with you for a while, then what is the task of parenting? What is it? It is preparation. One of preparation. While they are with you, you must prepare them for when they will leave. The job of parenting is the job of preparation and preparing them for wisdom. So that takes me to my second point. The task. Remember I said the child is eventually going to leave. But you want them to leave being wise. You don't just want them to leave. This is partly, and I'll get to that. This is partly why we can't let go. But you don't just want them to go out foolishly into the world. But yet you must let them go. Therefore, you have a task that has a time limit set on it. What can we say is that task? What can we say is that task of preparation? What does it really mean? Well, the Bible tells us exactly what it means in a very famous passage. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. I'll read it for the ESV. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. What is the job of preparation as a parent with a child? What is it? To train up. Training. Training. That's the job of a parent. But I love what it even says. You know, it gives a purposeful direction to the training. It says, train what? Up. Train up a child in where he should go. So where they should go is up. Should you train them? Up. I'm asking you, how should we train our children? Up. How should we train our children? Up. I didn't hear you well. How should we train our children? Up. Why? Because many parents are training their children down. There are other ways to train your children. When your children are with you, one way or the other, you're going to prepare them in one way or the other. To train them up is to train them in wisdom. To train them down is to train them in foolishness. To train them up is to make them independent. To train them down is to constantly make them dependent on you. To train them up is to allow them to be able to take their own decisions. To train them down is for you to be able to control them. When parents, knowingly or not, have their children too dependent on them, unable to eventually disagree with them, unable to make decisions on their own, and also be responsible for the results, they've trained down their children. Now, this happens when you assume different kinds of identities as a parent. I want to introduce you to 4 types of identities as a parent, and I want you to pick your own, all right? Parents that train down. 4 identities. 1, channeling parents. Channeling parents. Who are these? These are the parents who live their desired lives vicariously through their children. You know what I mean by that? First of all, we know this. When your children ask you, what did you come in school? I don't know if they still do position. What did you come in school? Every parent came first, isn't it? Why are you telling them that you came first? I came first too. So you must what? You must come first. You didn't come first. You always wanted to come first. So now you want your children to come first. These are parents that drive their children hard. So hard, they want their children to make it because they didn't quite make it. I made it to being a senior manager. I always wished I could have been a director. I know what to do. This child, we must panel beat this child right from the beginning. So even though all children start to write at 4, this child, you must write at 2. All children start to know numbers, start to count at 3. You must be doing sums, addition, and division at 3 years old. So they say, you know what you do? From the very beginning, play classical music when they're in the womb. It starts to stimulate their, you speak to them, you do all of these things. You start to prepare them. By the time they are 4 or 5, they start having private lesson teacher. As they are coming from school, they are dropping their bag, they don't even put them on, they don't even sit down on the dining table. They are taking their food and they are going into lesson. After they finish that lesson, they go for piano lesson. After they go for piano lesson, they watch news with you. It's news. You don't allow them. Why are they watching all this Peppa Pig for? Watch current affairs news. So that by the age of 10, they will be spoken about as this prodigy. That is almost, this child that is already at 10, is already about writing SSC. So that Harvard will have heard about that child. Send them scholars. You know all of this now. So you are driving that child. You are trying to channel your own dreams, the ones that you did not achieve. You are channeling it through those children. This is why many children in university are doing courses that they never wanted to study. Music, not everybody that is Wizkid and Davido. Besides, Wizkid and Davido did not study music. My friend, go and learn accounting. In case this music doesn't work, there is Mackenzie, Ernest & Young, all of these places. Or go and learn engineering. Go and, you understand? This fixed lawyer, I am a lawyer in my country. Did you ever see DJ in that song? I am a DJ. Yeah, the DJ is the one that is playing the music for us to say that I'm a lawyer in my country. Channeling parents. Second is regretful parents. This is a lot. We find this a lot in Lagos. These are parents that train down out of regret for the lost years. So let's say in the early part of your life, when you had the children, you were striving so much. You were hardly there. You worked 18 or 19 hours. And then one day you reach to the mountaintop of your career. And that child is 8 or 9. And you realize, I've been distant from this child. I've been distant. You try to talk to the child. You know what happened? You came home, the child saw you, said, hi, mommy, and the child went and hugged the maid. And he said, what have I done? The years that the locust and the caterpillar and the parent have taken, I'm going to get it back. You know what you then do? You now become overbearing. You start trying to force. You over-involved. Every little thing about the child, I have to be here, I have to make this, I have to do this one, because you are not training or trying to parent out of a set, stable, intentional method that the Bible has laid down. You are trying to regain something. So those 8 years, you are trying to cram them all in 1 year. You end up being overbearing and you end up being over-involved. Number 3, fearful parents. These are parents who idolize their kids and thus train them down out of fear. Now, I have to say this. Perhaps a certain circumstance has come. Perhaps they waited for so long before. A lot of people who wait for so long before they have children. Or maybe they've lost a number of children and finally they get this one. What do? You give that child any and everything that child wants. If you're in your room and that child is crying, what do? You come out. What happened to my child? Who beat this child? They made this so far away. What did you do? You idolize the child. You train out of fear. Overprotective. You are in the airport. The child moves from you like this. Just goes like this. And you are thinking about all those men that can rape children, pedophiles and everything. The child just moves. Say, come back here. Come back here. The child normally gets high grades. Very high grades. Above 90. One day, the child got 89. Hey, Jesus. My life is finished. This child is going to be a failure. Any small deviation, you've lost it. You idolize your children. If the child gets a little bit of a fever, you're canceling work, you're canceling everything. I'm not going to church, I'm not going to anything. Fever. Why? The idol that you've made out of this child has started to make you parent out of fear. If the child says they want to go out to just play football, you know what you do? So you want to go and play football. You say, you can't play. Why? No, you can't play. You don't have shoes. So the next day, you know what you do? You buy studded shoes. You buy shin pads. You buy bulletproof vests. Because you don't want anything to happen. If possible, you even put helmets there, just in case they fall. You have plotted every scenario of how things can go wrong. This staircase, if we don't rock this whole staircase, these children are going to fall. Do you see, the children, especially the boys, all of a sudden cannot be boys. The idolatry that you have, nothing must happen to this child. Nothing must go wrong with this child. Because this child is my all in all. The idolatry you have makes you parent out of fear. You eventually train down the child. Final one. Condescending parents. A lot of us were raised by these ones. Trained down out of an inflated view of adults and a degraded view of children. Their children are never allowed to make any decision. What do you even know, Seth? Just listen to me. Always listen to your parents. We know best. They are not allowed to express their opinions. What opinion? Children are meant to be seen and not heard. You started to have opinion. They do that when they're 5. They do that when they're 12. They do that when they're 19. Mommy, I think I can marry this boy. Marry you. What do you know about boys? Mommy, I think I love him. You see, that's the problem. That's the problem. What do you know? So every opinion they express, you always just dismiss. You know what happens? When they're 28, their children are still their kids. Their opinion still doesn't matter. They can never ever see that children could be right and parents could be wrong. They could never see that the children actually know something that is mine. Remember, let me give you one example. After I grew up in some churches, I went to UK, the first church I went to. So at this point, I'm in my mid-20s. First church I went to, second church I went to there, they said they wanted to pray for the youth in the church. So if you're a youth, come out. So that's how your guy was, getting up, right? Okay, want to go and that guy is in secondary school now. No, that girl, I don't know whether she's in secondary school, but we are not mates. I'm not a mate. For them, youth were like 14 to like 17. Now, here's the problem. It wasn't that I was 14 to 17. I never graduated out of the youth. That was the problem. Because as far as we were concerned in that place, everyone that was younger than you, the youth kept on being the youth. The youth were the youth even up to their 30s. Why? Because the people that first started calling you youth, they were still older than you. As long as they were older than you, they knew more than you. So I was still youth. Actually, I've been told that now the youth for them is about from age, when they say youth meeting, is about 18 to 40. So, huh? Or 45, who knows? But you see the problem. As long as I'm older, it comes from the sense of, as long as I'm older than you, I know more than you. It's a condescending view. And this view never goes, even when your children then get married. When you go into their home and they say they want to do this, you get some people saying, I'd like to do this, but I don't know how to tell my mom and my dad. What? Is it to tell them for permission, or is it to tell them for, what do you mean? This is what happens when you train down a child as a condescending parent. So if we are going to train our children, I think there are 3 spheres. Well, it's 4, but I can't get into the 4th one. There are 3 spheres. If preparation implies training, then training requires education. Now, because we have ministries of education, commission for education, we start to think of education as something done by others. But the Bible here says training is done by the parents, primarily, not exclusively, but primarily. I want us to think about 3 areas. I said there could have been a 4th, but 3 areas, especially as human beings, that we must try to educate our children, thinking broadly about it. Especially as we think about who we are as human beings. 1, technically. Now, this is fair where we must train them technically. This is fair we are very familiar with. And because we're very familiar with, we know this to be somebody else's job. It's for teachers. Now, don't get me wrong, and there are various forms of how we formally educate our children. And we have to determine what's best for us. Some people want to think about homeschooling. Some people want to think about public schooling, private schooling, whatever it is. Let's think about what's best in our time according to our capacity. But it's important to give children the skills that will eventually enable them to make a living. Largely, it's developing the skills that will enable you to make a living. Now, formal education helps with this, but parents gain, as parents, the gaining of skills should not be limited to schools. We shouldn't limit it to schools. So as a parent, what should I be doing? Get your children books. It's not for the school to give them books, like the books that they actually read. You know, the ones in school, they don't really like reading. Get them books. Or if you start seeing this child has a penchant for computers or something, rather than allow them to start getting into Instagram and whatever, give them programming. And please, please encourage the inquisitiveness of your children. When they ask you something that you don't know, don't say just go away. Because you are trying to tell them it doesn't matter when you're... this life is not about asking questions. This life is about just being told what to do. They ask you, so who is this one? Who is that one? Look, I have a child that he can drive me nuts with questions. It's not very easy, but still, I don't always know everything. Sometimes I'll say, I'll be on my computer, it's asking me a question. I'll be like, oh, what's your problem? You're Googling it. You understand? You have to Google the thing. But when you see a certain passion and ability in that child, start to push towards it. Once you start seeing that your children are good, your child is very good programming-wise and all of that, push. Find something in a way to encourage. Amen? The gaining of skill is not for teachers alone. It's there, it's important. We can't do everything on our own. But we can also encourage. I don't know, they don't do it now. Back in the days, we used to have this thing, encyclopedias, that give us more knowledge about the world. I thank God I had, my parents bought quite a few of them, and I went through all of them. Try to push your children in more constructive directions. Don't only get them on video games, give them constructive games. Second, you must train morally. If the first technically is focused on competence, this is focused on character. This deals with character. Too often we have a in terms of our training, we have a very shunted view of humanity. We look at humans as people with skills to be developed rather than souls to be nurtured. There was a preacher, Dale Moody. He said this. I don't know if I can get... no, I can't. Let me just give his own example. I want to make it more relevant to us. He said, if you see a thief that steals nuts and bolts on a railroad track, and you send him to school, because you know what's happened now is education. He doesn't have education. If he has education, he'll be a productive member of society. He said, if you see a thief and take him to college, a thief that was stealing bolts and nuts from a railroad track, and put him to college, you know what will happen? When he comes out of college, he will steal the whole company, the whole railway company. Because you focus on just educating his hands and not educating his heart. Let me tell you something. Yahoo boys are one of the most hardworking people I know. Those guys that you see with Range Rovers and Benz, that's what I'm told. If you have a Benz, Femi, or a Range Rover is a Yahoo, in Lekki is Yahoo. Those guys work hard, 19 hours. They're on the computer, typing emails, constructing emails. Those people, not only do they know computers, they know imagination and stories. I am a Nigerian prince. You construct all of that. They know human beings. They work very hard. Here's the problem. They've been given a mentality that making it in life, no matter what, irrespective of the means, is all that matters. If you try to develop your children with competence alone, without looking at the heart and developing their character, you'll be developing highly sophisticated criminals. Third, we must develop them socially. If the first is competence, the second is focused on character, the third focuses on chemistry. Chemistry with the outside world. This one is the most neglected. You know, companies are waking up, some of us are employers here, companies are waking up to the fact that hiring a first-class graduate that cannot engage with a client over a mail to cut a deal is a liability. Spreadsheets, fantastic. Analysis, wonderful. Sit down with a client and help us close this deal. They keep looking at their plate, they can't look at the person. This person, I'm not trying to, jump on somebody who is actually having a hard time, because I actually admire this person. But I read an article recently. I don't know if you know who Theresa May is, right? She's the outgoing Prime Minister of Britain. Now, how did she get in? She got in largely because when the previous Prime Minister declared a referendum on whether they should stay in and out of Europe, she had been the Home Secretary. She'd been the longest serving Home Secretary in over a century. Now, the Home Secretary is a job where you need a no-nonsense person. You don't need somebody that is so flashy and all of that. So she had done it very well. And so when they were doing this campaign for the referendum, she hardly said a word. They called her the submarine. She was going under. So when the campaign, when the result came out and that caused polarity in the party, and now they needed a new leader because the current one, the one that gave the referendum, had to resign, who did they choose? They did not choose someone who they really knew. They chose a safe pair of hands because in the midst of chaos, we want some kind of stability. She looked at someone stable, manage us out. So now she enters into this chaos that is Brexit. Here's the thing, what the article said. As you try to negotiate, your negotiation is not best done in committee rooms. In fact, they said that most deals that were done in Westminster, that's where the parliament meets, most deals that were done in a bar. Do you know how she entered and became the leader of the Conservative? Her tagline was that she doesn't actually go to the bars with the MPs. She was stable. She wasn't part of the cliques. But they said most deals were cut when you are in a bar or when you are in a corner somewhere trying to ask somebody, you know this thing, help me now, guy, you know, all of those things. That is how political deals were struck. At the time of crisis, she had no friend. She was, in terms of her competence, she was thoroughly developed. In terms of her character, she was near impeccable. But socially developed, she was very, very low on that. And as a result, when she needed her friends the most, she had no friends. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding about this. Some 21-year-old guys do not know how to toast a girl because of parents. I'm serious. They can't talk to, just talk, let me talk. And you think you are being a good Christian because my child that is 21 is a slacker. I don't know if they still use that word. Let me tell you, you are not. You have not been. Human beings were created as social beings. It is not good for the man to be what? Alone. I am not saying that means the person should be doing all the bad things that we forbid in Christianity. No. But so, hey, I don't want any child to come into this house that is not my children's cousin. Who is that boy? No, I see him around, though. He's a bad boy. Okay, your child likes the bad boy. Is it not better for you to have the bad boy and your child in the house so that you can see the bad boy? I don't allow my children to go and sleep in anybody's house. I don't allow my children to go out. If they must go for a party, I must be there. And the moment they're having one small argument, you immediately come in. Hey, leave my child alone. You don't allow them to develop social skills. You are going to the market. You know how to haggle. And you're not carrying that child to the market because you don't want any disturbance. Whereas that is where they build the negotiating skills in life. Haggling with market women. We all go to a ShopRite. You know what ShopRite does to you? It kills your negotiating skills. Why? Because they print the price for you. It's there, fixed. Take it or leave it. In fact, I've not bought meat in ShopRite before. I learned buying meat in butcher, you know. I buy Lero. You understand? How much is this thing? 5,000. You start walking. I'm not doing it. Now, come back now. Hello, me see that family. 3,000. Oh yeah, move 3,500. What? Egba 3,001 lele. You know, you learn. You have to relate. Funny but true. We have to allow our children to interact. Let them express their humanity. They have to be social. Of course, there are boundaries. It's crazy not to have boundaries. But allow people to relate. Or else their confidence, they will have none. They will not be able to look people in the eye. They will go for a presentation. They will be stuttering from beginning to end. Not because they don't know it, but because they've not been used to looking at people. You must develop them technically. You must develop them morally. You must develop them socially, if you want to build them to be wise. Let me not even get into talking, having the talk. I won't call it what the talk is. Don't wait for the talk until they are 21. Many of them have already started doing the thing of the talk before they are 21. Now that brings me to the goal. Finally. Now remember I said they were trying to build them up to be wise. That's what we want them to. Because wisdom moves a child from dependence to independence. Now, I've spoken about technical, moral, and social training. However, there's a lot of earthly wisdom you can build technically, morally, and socially. What I have just spoken about has prepared your child to live under the sun, as Ecclesiastes told us. Here's the thing. Are they wise to live for eternity? Because living under the sun is not the only thing. Listen to what Paul says in 2 Timothy 3 about this young guy called Timothy. He said, but as for you, continue in what you have learned and have become convinced of, because you know those from whom you learned it, and how from infancy you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ. As a parent, what is your ultimate goal? Is it to make your children wise for salvation? Because make no mistake, this happened to Timothy, not just because Timothy had a very terrible experience. He was on the road one day and God appeared to him in some kind of vision. No, how did this happen to Timothy? Look at chapter 1 of 2 Timothy, in verse 5. I am reminded of your sincere faith. Okay, he had faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. How did Timothy become saved? By excellent grandparenting and excellent parenting. Or in fact, let me say, excellent parenting in 2 generations. Lois trained and taught and made Eunice wise salvation. Eunice did the same thing to Timothy. So many of us are so excited by the person who got saved because he was a drug addict for 28 years. Fantastic. But the most important one, when that guy gets saved, do you think he wants his child also to become a prostitute before she gets saved? He wants her, because she grew up in a Christian home, he wants to teach her to be wise unto what? Salvation. Listen, parenting is not just about moral behavior modification, but the regeneration of the heart. Parenting is not just about preparing children for relationships with people, but for a saving relationship with God through Christ. Parenting isn't just about technically equipping children for the workplace, but to equip them in the Scriptures and for every good work. All Scripture is God-breathed and used for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. I want to give us 4 tips for preparing our children for eternity, and I'll close with that. Four things. First, pray about it. Far too many parents, when it's time to pray for their children, they're declaring success over them. They are building a hedge of protection and a wall around them. But many of them do not pray for their children's eternity. They're worried about their kids' grades. They pray about their kids' internship. But you hardly hear about them praying for their children's salvation. Can I tell you something? Please, you will be abdicating your responsibility as a parent. I'm telling you now. If any day you pray for your children, you don't pray for their salvation. Any day. And I think you should try and pray for them at least daily. Pray for their salvation. Second, speak about it. Now, when I say speak about it, I don't mean shove it down their throats, right? In fact, most times when parents shove down their Christianity down the children's throat, it doesn't become Christianity, it becomes legalism. But some people, by trying to say that I don't want to be a legalist to my child, you just sort of leave it. No. If it's very important for you, you have to speak about it. Let them know what it means to be saved. Let them aspire to want to get baptized. And the ways we do that is let them love the Bible. Timothy knew the Holy Scriptures. Teach them the Bible. Help them with memory verses. When they give you, Funke will love this, I don't know if she's there. If they've given you a memory verse from City Kids that they are meant to, don't just let them read it. Do it with them. Look at the lessons that they learned from City Kids. Talk to them about it. Buy them songs. Don't just only allow them to listen to Justin Bieber. Allow them to listen to, I remember when we were growing up, who remember Salty the Singing Songbook? Right? I'm going to hide God's word in my heart. I'm going to hide God's word in my heart. In my feet, something like that. All right, it's been a while. Let's say why. Let them know some of these things. And for the ones that are younger, that are now probably going to 7 or 8, please have devotions with them every night. I don't know what to read. I don't know how to pay. I'm not a pastor. I'm not get out there are books, honestly. There are plenty children's books that will give you devotions. I have one self, 52 devotions for 52 weeks of the Bible. For children 8 to 10. There are many resources. If it matters much to you, then you will find a way around it. It's your responsibility. Third, exemplify it. Remember, it said that Paul said the sincere faith that he saw in Timothy, he first saw it in his grandmother and he saw it in his mother. It was exemplified. You see, far too many children abandon the faith because of the hypocrisy or the ugliness of character of their parents. I'm telling you, some children know this. They know how terrible their parents are at home. Then they now see them as deacons in the church. They see them as people who teach on parenting. What do you think those children think about the Christianity? It's a sham. They come to church, they cannot wait until they leave their parents' home and stop going to church. This is why a lot of children go into university, and when they should be looking for fellowship, they are looking for the first nightclub to go to. Because like this thing, if I want to be bad, let me be kukuma bad. Not like those my parents. I must say 4 things on this. 1, in exemplifying, don't abuse people or gossip about them at home. You may think, I'm just talking in the privacy of my home. Your children are listening. They see when that person comes to your house, how you smile with them, and they see how you guys trash them at home. Don't do it. First of all, you shouldn't gossip at all. But your children are watching. These children, even at 5, 6, I still remember things at 5 and 6, don't you? Yeah. Second, please, if you've been harsh with your children, right? It's okay to say, Moyo, please forgive me. Daddy was wrong. It is very okay to say it. In fact, it's not just okay. It is the right thing to do. Rather than, what's wrong with you now? Or you want to bribe them with sweet or chocolate. How terrible is that? You're not only just teaching your children corruption at a very early age. You're being a coward. At some point, that child that you bribed at 6 with chocolate is going to be 16. Chocolate will not do it again. Say, I'm sorry. You may have over-disciplined them. You may have been too harsh. You may have dismissed them. And they walk away just looking sad. You now start feeling bad. You start thinking about yourself, about how I upset my child, rather than going to say, I'm sorry. Forgive me. Don't just say, I'm sorry. Ask for their forgiveness. Because when they are wrong and you punish them, don't you ask them to say they are sorry? So why can't you? Because you are their parent. You can't do that. Third, please listen. Take your children to church regularly. If you are not doing so, what do you think your children will think about church in terms of its importance? First of all, also, in fact, make church so important that your children know, we have to get to church early. Because if you are not getting, let me tell you something. Initially, I don't know about you, I don't know about what the children will say about City Church, but I know when growing up, going to church, if you ask me, because they used to show wrestling, there was this wrestling they used to show around 11 a.m. I did not like going to church. Children don't want to go to church. They are catechized and they learn. Those children that don't want to go to church, even up until they're 18, when they are 25, 26, once they have a child, you know what they first start looking for? You know what they start looking for? Church. because they realize how important it is. Don't make it that it is on the day that you want to go to church. That is the day you are just waking up late. You know what your child is learning? It's okay to be late to church. Do you know what that means? Church is not that important. Do you know what that means? The people of God are not that important. Do you know what that means? That God isn't that important. The number one way children learn is through imitation. And the primary people that they are going to imitate is who? And when you then bring them to church, require that they be attentive. Everybody, just this morning, I came here, everybody was singing hymn and killing. My son was there. You know what he said? I said, get up. He said, I'm tired. We're tired. At what time? My friend, get up. So every time you tell him, get up. If your child is on the phone, in fact, they shouldn't bring their phone to church. But how can you tell your child to be off the phone when during church, you are also on your own phone? Hypocrite. So you have to exemplify what you are asking them to do. Show them what is important. And finally, on this exemplifying, if you are married, please hear this. Treat your spouse in a loving and godly way. A lot of children learn your bad habits, or they learn exactly how they don't want to be husbands or wives. But please don't allow your child to learn how not to be a husband or a wife. Love your wives. Love your husband in front, glaringly in front of your children. Not just in the room. Glaringly in front of your children. And then we pray about it, we speak about it, we exemplify it, and then we outsource it, final. That is, ensure they have a relationship with another godly adult. One of the most staggering research I read 3 or 4 years ago was this. They said, this was in the West, but I think it applies. Do you know the number one factor that was most important for a child to retain their faith when they go to university? The number one factor, glaring, was that child had a relationship with another adult that was not their parents. It's another reason why you bring them to church. It's another reason why you don't always suspect that auntie or that uncle. Because sometimes familiarity breeds contempt. No matter how my children are my best friend, blah, blah, there are some things they can't talk to you about. Do they have that auntie and uncle they can trust? That they like? Encourage it. Encourage them to go out with them. And some of us here who are singles, who are not married, who are maybe not thinking of getting married or are still waiting to be married, invest some of your time in couples' children. Offer to babysit. Offer to know them. You learn how to parent. But at the same time, you'll also be saving someone's soul from hell. Parenting is a huge task. Here, there are broad concepts that we've used. We'll talk a little bit more about the interpersonal relationship next week. But I want us to bow down quickly and pray.